The chandeliers blazed with 1,000 candles, their light cruel and unforgiving. Isolde Wren stood at the edge of the ballroom floor, surrounded by 300 guests who had stopped dancing to watch her destruction. Her gown was ivory silk, chosen weeks ago when she still believed tonight would be her engagement celebration. Now it felt like a burial shroud. "You see?" Lady Giselle Holt announced to the crowd, her voice carrying with practiced precision. "This is what happens when a desperate family sells a liar for a daughter." Isolde's hands trembled at her sides. She willed them to stop. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. Phineas Holt, the man she had been engaged to for 3 months, stood beside his mother with a smile that made Isolde's stomach turn. That same smile he had worn when he proposed. That same smile he had worn when she found the documents in his father's study. Shipping manifests that didn't match declared cargo. Names of young women listed as inventory. Payments to foreign ports that specialized in selling human beings. "You understand, darling," Phineas had said when she confronted him, his tone patient, like he was explaining something to a child. "This is simply business. My family has conducted it for 3 generations. You weren't supposed to find those records, but now that you have a choice. Marry me, keep quiet, and live very comfortably." Or... He hadn't needed to finish. The threat had been clear in his eyes. Isolde had chosen to run. She had tried to reach the authorities, tried to find someone who would listen, but the Holts had connections everywhere. Within 48 hours, they had destroyed her reputation with whispers of madness, fabricated debts, and forged letters suggesting she had tried to extort Phineas with false accusations. Now she stood in the middle of Thornhaven Manor, their ancestral estate, at a ball they had orchestrated specifically for this moment. Her family had been summoned, forced to watch. Her mother wept silently near the doorway. Her younger brother looked like he wanted to murder someone but knew he couldn't. "Since Miss Wren seems so eager for attention," Lady Giselle continued, her smile sharp as a blade, "we thought we should give her a partner worthy of her new station." The crowd parted. Whispers erupted like fire through dry grass. Him. They were giving her to him. Kaelan Ashworth emerged from the shadows near the far wall. The fallen Duke, society called him. The last surviving member of a family that had once rivaled the Holts in power before their spectacular collapse 8 years ago. Rumor said he was penniless, surviving on charity. Rumor said his family's fall had broken something in him. Rumor said associating with him was social death. He was tall, dressed in black that looked expensive but outdated. His dark hair was longer than fashion dictated, and a thin scar traced from his left temple to his jaw. A remnant, they said, of the fire that had killed his parents and destroyed his family's fortune. The crowd watched with hungry anticipation. This was the final blow, forcing Isolde Wren to dance with the most pitied, most avoided man in society, marking her as finished. Kaelan Ashworth stopped 3 feet from her. His eyes were pale gray, almost silver in the candlelight, and they held something Isolde couldn't quite read. Not pity, not cruelty, something else entirely. The orchestra began a waltz. No one else moved to dance. This was a spectacle, and they intended to watch every moment. "Miss Wren." His voice was low, controlled, meant only for her ears. He extended his hand, palm up. "Dance with me." It wasn't a question. It wasn't quite a command either. It was something in between, an invitation wrapped in inevitability. Isolde looked at his scarred face, at the hand that society considered poison to touch, at the man everyone avoided like plague. Then she looked back at Phineas, at his satisfied smirk, at Lady Giselle's triumphant expression. They expected her to crumble. They expected tears, humiliation, and defeat. Isolde placed her hand in Kaelan Ashworth's. His fingers closed around hers, warm, steady, surprisingly strong. And as he led her onto the empty dance floor, surrounded by hundreds of watching eyes, Isolde realized something that made her heart stutter. He wasn't looking at her with pity. He was looking at her with recognition. Like he had been waiting for this moment. Like he knew exactly who she was. The waltz began. Kalen Ashworth moved with a grace that contradicted everything Isolde had heard about him. His hand at her waist was firm, but not restrictive. His steps were flawless, guiding her through the dance as if they had rehearsed this 100 times. The crowd watched, waiting for her to stumble, to weep, to break. She refused. "You're doing well," he murmured, his lips barely moving. "Better than they expected. I won't give them the satisfaction." Her voice was steadier than she felt. "No, I don't imagine you will." He turned her smoothly, putting his back to the Holts. "You found their shipping records, the ones detailing their trade in human cargo." Isolde's step faltered. He corrected it instantly, making it look like part of the dance. "How do you know that?" she whispered. "Because I've been watching the Holts for 8 years. Because I know everything about their business, their crimes, their lies." His gray eyes held hers. "And because you're the first person who ever tried to stop them." The music swelled around them. Other couples had begun to join the floor now that the initial spectacle seemed disappointing. No tears, no collapse. Just a man and woman dancing. "Who are you?" Isolde asked. "Really?" "In public, I'm exactly what they believe. A ruined man, a cautionary tale, someone to be pitied and avoided." His hand tightened slightly at her waist. "In reality, I am the person who holds the deed to this estate. I own the bank that manages Holt Finances. I control 60% of the shipping contracts in this region through companies they've never thought to investigate." Isolde stared at him. "That's impossible. Your family lost everything." "My family lost their lives. Their fortune was hidden before the fire, moved, invested, grown." Something cold flickered in his expression. "The Holts arranged that fire, Miss Wren. They murdered my parents and my sister to eliminate competition. Then they spread rumors of our financial ruin to ensure no one would look too closely." The room seemed to tilt. Isolde's feet kept moving, guided by his lead, but her mind raced. "You've spent 8 years pretending to be destroyed," she said slowly, "while secretly becoming powerful enough to destroy them." "Yes. Why haven't you?" "Because I needed proof. Testimony. Someone who had seen their records with their own eyes and could identify what was real." He turned her again, and for a moment his mouth was near her ear. "Someone exactly like you." The waltz was ending. Isolde could feel it in the slowing tempo, the approaching final notes. "What are you suggesting?" she asked. "I'm suggesting that in approximately 30 seconds, this dance will end. You can return to your ruined life, watch the Holts destroy what remains of your family, and spend your years knowing what they truly are while being powerless to stop them. Or you leave with me tonight. I give you protection they cannot penetrate. You give me your testimony, your knowledge, everything you remember from those documents. And together, we dismantle them piece by piece until there's nothing left. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. Trust is earned, not given." The music reached its final notes. "But consider this. The Holts humiliated you tonight because you tried to do something right. I'm offering you the chance to finish what you started." The waltz ended. The room erupted in polite applause that was really just an excuse to watch what would happen next. Kalen Ashworth stepped back, but did not release her hand. "Oh, well, Miss Wren?" His voice was barely audible above the applause. "Do you want revenge, or do you want to go back to being their victim?" Isolde looked across the ballroom. Lady Giselle was frowning, clearly disappointed by the lack of tears. Phineas was watching with narrowed eyes, suspicious of how composed she appeared. She thought of the names in those documents. young women, some no older than her brother, listed as cargo, sold to fates she couldn't bear to imagine. And the Holts, standing there in their finery, untouchable, unthreatened, unpunished. Not revenge, she said quietly, turning back to Kaelin. Justice. There's a difference. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps? Or respect? There is indeed. He offered his arm. Then allow me to escort you to your carriage, Miss Wren. She placed her hand on his arm. I think I've had enough of Holt hospitality. They walked toward the exit together, and the crowd parted before them. Not out of respect, but out of the instinctive avoidance they had always shown Kaelin Ashworth. None of them knew they were watching the beginning of their own destruction. The night air hit Isolde like a slap, cold and sharp after the stifling heat of the ballroom. A black carriage waited at the foot of the manor steps unmarked, with a driver who nodded at Kaelin without speaking. You planned this, Isolde said, as he helped her inside. You knew they would humiliate me tonight. I knew they would do something. He climbed in after her, settling onto the opposite seat. The Holts are predictable in their cruelty. Public destruction is their preferred method of eliminating threats. I simply made sure I was present when it happened. The carriage lurched forward. Through the window, Isolde watched Thornhaven Manor shrink into the distance, its lights blazing like a beacon of everything she was leaving behind. Where are we going? Ashworth Hall? My family's estate? He must have seen her confusion because he added, the one everyone believes burned to the ground. It didn't. Only the east wing was damaged. The rest has been quietly maintained and restored since the fire. So everything people think they know about you is a lie. Not everything. I am the last of my family. I did lose everyone I loved. I have spent years watching the people who murdered them enjoy wealth and status while I pretended to be broken. His voice remained level, but Isolde heard the ice beneath it. The only lie is that I'm powerless. The carriage rattled through darkened streets. Isolde tried to process everything she had learned in the past hour. This morning, she had been a disgraced woman with no options. Now she was riding toward an uncertain future with a man who had built an empire in secret while the world pitied him. What happens when we arrive? She asked. You'll be given rooms, clothing, everything you need. Tomorrow, we'll begin documenting what you remember from the Holt records. Names, dates, shipping routes, anything that can be verified independently. And if I change my mind? If I decide this is madness and I want to leave? Kaelin studied her for a long moment. The shadows in the carriage made his scarred face difficult to read. Then I'll arrange safe passage for you to anywhere you wish to go. I'm not Phineas Holt, Miss Wren. I don't trap women into arrangements they can't escape. But you need me. I need your testimony. There's a difference between needing what someone knows and needing to own them. He looked out the window. I've waited years for this. I can wait longer if necessary. But I don't think you want to wait. I think you want those women in the manifests to be found. I think you want the Holts to pay for what they've done, not just to you, but to everyone. Isolde didn't answer. She couldn't, because he was right, and they both knew it. The carriage turned onto a private road, and through the trees, Isolde glimpsed lights in the distance. Not the crumbling ruin she had expected. Something else entirely. Welcome to Ashworth Hall, Miss Wren, Kaelin said. Your new life begins now. The carriage slowed. Isolde's pulse quickened. She had been publicly destroyed tonight, forced to dance with the man everyone avoided, marked as finished. Instead, she had found the one person who might help her finish something far more important. Whether that made her lucky or doomed, she couldn't yet tell. Ashworth Hall rose from the darkness like a forgotten cathedral. Isolde had expected decay. What she found instead stole her breath. The manor was enormous. 4 stories of gray stone and Gothic arches, with wings stretching into manicured gardens that disappeared into the night. Warm light glowed from dozens of windows, and liveried footmen descended the front steps before the carriage had fully stopped. "This is not what I expected," Isolde admitted. "That's rather the point." Kalen stepped out first, then offered his hand. "The world sees what I allow them to see. Ruin, poverty, a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, this exists." The entrance hall was grander than anything in Thornhaven Manor. Marble floors reflected candlelight from crystal chandeliers. Portraits lined the walls, generations of Ashworths watching her with painted eyes. An older woman appeared, silver-haired and ramrod straight, dressed in immaculate black. "Mrs. Covenant," Kalen said, "this is Mrs. Isolde Wren. She'll be staying with us indefinitely. See that she has everything she needs." Mrs. Covenant assessed Isolde with a single sweeping glance that seemed to measure her worth, her character, and her potential all at once. "The wisteria suite has been prepared, Your Grace. Shall I arrange for a physician? Just rest tonight. Tomorrow we begin." Isolde followed Mrs. Covenant through corridors that seemed endless, up a sweeping staircase, and into a suite of rooms larger than her family's entire apartment. A sitting room with a fireplace already crackling. A bedroom with a canopied bed draped in deep blue silk. A private bathing chamber with a copper tub already filled with steaming water. "His Grace keeps unusual hours," Mrs. Covenant said. "Breakfast is served at 8. He typically takes his in the study while working. You'll find him there most mornings and most nights as well." "Does he ever rest?" "Not since his family died." Mrs. Covenant paused at the door. "He's waited years for someone who could help him end the Holts. Don't make him wait longer than necessary." Alone, Isolde sank into a chair by the fire. Her mind spun with everything that had happened since sunset. The humiliation, the dance, the revelations. And now this. A hidden world that existed in plain sight, built by a man everyone believed was broken. Sleep came eventually, restless and filled with dreams of burning ships and women screaming in languages she couldn't understand. The next 3 weeks transformed Isolde into something unrecognizable. Kalen was relentless. Each morning they sat in his study surrounded by maps, ledgers, and shipping records he had spent years collecting. Isolde recounted everything she remembered from the Holt documents: names of ships, ports of origin, dates of departure, the coded language used to disguise human cargo as specialty goods. "The Maiden's Promise," she said one afternoon, pointing to a manifest. "I remember that name. It appeared 3 times in the records I found." Kalen made a note. "The Maiden's Promise was decommissioned 2 years ago. Officially, it sank in a storm. In reality, it was scuttled after authorities began asking questions about its cargo. They killed the evidence. They killed the witnesses too. The entire crew." His jaw tightened. "That's how the Holts operate. Eliminate anyone who becomes inconvenient." "Like your family." Kalen set down his pen. For a long moment he didn't speak. "My sister Evangeline was 17, he said finally. She had discovered the same truth you did, that the Holts were trafficking women. She was going to expose them at the autumn ball." His voice remained steady, but his hands had gone still. "The fire started that night. They called it an accident. But I was there. I saw the men who set it. Holt men. And I watched my family burn while I was dragged to safety by a servant who died of her injuries 3 days later." Isolde's chest ached. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry, be useful." He met her eyes. "Help me make sure their deaths meant something. I want to do more than testify." The words came out before she could stop them. "I want to help you take them down, actively, not just as a witness." "That's dangerous." "So is everything about this. But those women in the manifests, they're still out there, still suffering." She leaned forward. "I didn't survive that night just to hide in a beautiful prison and wait for you to save everyone. I want to fight." A flicker of approval crossed his features. Not quite a smile, but close. Then we'll need to accelerate your education. The education Kaylin provided was nothing like Isolde had experienced before. She learned to read shipping manifests like novels, identifying the patterns that revealed hidden cargo. She studied the network of shell companies the Holts used to obscure their operations. She memorized the faces and names of Holt associates, men who attended society functions while secretly profiting from human misery. But more than anything, she learned to perform. You'll need to re-enter society eventually, Kaylin explained. When you do, every word you speak, every expression you show, will be scrutinized. The Holts will be watching for weakness. I've attended society events my entire life. As a guest, a decoration. Now you'll be a weapon. He circled her slowly. When you walk into a room, people need to see confidence, not victimhood. They need to wonder what you know, not pity what you've lost. 3 weeks after her arrival, Kaylin announced her first test. Lord Pemberton is hosting a private dinner tomorrow evening. 12 guests, all carefully selected. 3 of them have financial ties to Holt operations, though they may not know the full extent of what they're funding. Isolde's stomach tightened. You want me to attend? I want you to perform. You'll go as my guest. A distant cousin recently arrived from the country. You'll be charming, forgettable, and completely unthreatening. He handed her a small leather folder. And you'll determine which of these 3 men is most likely to turn against the Holts, if properly motivated. The dinner was held at Pemberton House. Isolde wore a modest gown of dove gray, chosen specifically to be unremarkable, and introduced herself as Miss Wren, recently returned from extended family in the northern provinces. No one recognized her. The humiliation at Thornhaven Manor had been witnessed by society's upper echelon. These were minor nobles and wealthy merchants, people who read about such scandals in gossip sheets rather than attending them. She was invisible. It was perfect. Throughout dinner, she observed her 3 targets. Lord Ashby, a portly banker who laughed too loudly. Mr. Cornelius Vance, a shipping merchant with nervous eyes who flinched whenever the Holt name was mentioned. And Sir Dietrich Fane, an investor whose calm demeanor never wavered. By dessert, Isolde had her answer. Vance, she told Kaylin in the carriage afterward. He's terrified. When Lord Ashby mentioned new investment opportunities with the Holts, Vance went pale. He knows something is wrong, and he's afraid of being implicated. What makes you certain? He asked me about my family 3 times, specifically whether any of them were involved in shipping. She met Kaylin's gaze. He's looking for allies. Kaylin was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Well done. 2 words. But the warmth in his voice made Isolde feel like she had won a battle. Vance has a daughter, Kaylin continued. 17. The same age Evangeline was. I suspect that's why his conscience is finally troubling him. What do? We give him a way out, and in exchange he gives us everything he knows about Holt's shipping operations. Kaylin looked out the window. You've just identified our first real witness, Miss Wren. The cracks are beginning to form. 4 days later, everything changed. Isolde was in the library, reviewing shipping routes, when Kaylin burst through the doors. His composure, the carefully maintained calm she had come to expect, was shattered. We have a problem. What happened? He handed her a letter, the paper trembling slightly in his grip. Vance is dead. His carriage went off a bridge last night. They're calling it an accident. Isolde's blood went cold. The Holts. Obviously, which means they know someone is investigating. They don't know who or how much, but they know enough to start eliminating potential threats. His daughter. Safe. I had her moved to a secure location 2 days ago. Kaylin ran a hand through his hair. But this changes our timeline. We can't spend months building a case anymore. The Holts are cleaning house. What do we do? There's a gathering next week. Lady Ashford's spring gala. The Holts will be there. So will half the investors who fund their operations, and several magistrates who could authorize an investigation if properly motivated. You want to confront them publicly? Already? I want to accelerate the pressure, make them panic. Panicked people make mistakes. He crossed to her, stopping close enough that she could see the tension in his jaw. But it's risky. Once we show our hand, there's no going back. They'll know you survived. They'll know I'm involved. Then we'd better be ready. Kaylin studied her face. You understand what I'm asking? This isn't a practice dinner with merchants who don't recognize you. This is the lion's den. Phineas will be there. Lady Giselle. Everyone who watched your humiliation. Good. Isolde felt something cold and certain settle in her chest. Let them see what their cruelty created. Isolde. It was the first time he had used her given name. The sound of it on his lips made her breath catch. If we do this, I need to know you won't hesitate. When you face Phineas, when he tries to undermine you, you cannot falter. I won't. How can you be certain? Because I spent 3 months engaged to a monster and I survived. Because I walked into that ballroom expecting to be destroyed and I walked out with you instead. Because every night I dream about the women in those manifests, and every morning I wake up more determined to save them. She stepped closer, close enough to see the weight of all those years of waiting in his eyes. I'm not afraid of Phineas Holt anymore. The only thing I fear is failing the people who need us to succeed. Kaylin was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and touched her cheek. His fingers were gentle, tentative, like he was afraid she might break. You are remarkable, he said quietly. I don't think you understand how rare that is. Then show me. Trust me. Let me stand beside you when we face them. His hand dropped, but his eyes never left hers. All right. We do this together. The door opened. Mrs. Covenant appeared, her expression urgent. Your Grace, there's a messenger from Lady Ashford. The gala has been moved forward. It's in 3 days, not 7. 3 days. 3 days until she faced the people who had tried to destroy her. Isolde looked at Kaylin. He looked at her. Then we have work to do, he said. Lady Ashford's spring gala was the event of the season. 300 guests filled the grand ballroom of Ashford House, a glittering assembly of wealth, power, and carefully curated reputation. Isolde stood at the top of the entrance staircase, her hand resting on Kaylin's arm. She was unrecognizable from the woman who had been humiliated at Thornhaven Manor 3 weeks ago. Her gown was midnight blue velvet, cut in the latest fashion, with sapphires at her throat that matched Kaylin's cufflinks. She looked like she belonged here. More importantly, she looked like she had always belonged here. Ready? Kaylin murmured. No, but that's never stopped me before. The majordomo's voice rang out across the ballroom. His Grace, the Duke of Ashworth, Mrs. Isolde Wren. The reaction was immediate. Whispers erupted like wildfire. Heads turned. The Duke of Ashworth, the fallen Duke, the man everyone avoided, had arrived at the most prestigious event of the season with a woman on his arm. And not just any woman. Isolde saw the moment Phineas Holt recognized her. He stood near the champagne fountain with his mother. When his eyes found Isolde, his champagne glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The sound cut through the whispers like a gunshot. Phineas, darling, what on earth? Lady Giselle followed her son's gaze. Her face went white, then red, then settled into something that looked almost like fear. Isolde smiled, a small, composed, devastating smile. She was supposed to be destroyed, erased from society and memory. Instead, she was descending the grand staircase on the arm of a duke, wearing sapphires that cost more than the Holt's annual income, looking every inch the woman who had already won. Breathe, Kaylin said softly. Let them come to us. Lady Ashford herself approached. Your Grace, What an unexpected pleasure. We so rarely see you at these gatherings. I had reason to attend tonight. Kaylin's voice carried effortlessly. Allow me to introduce Miss Isolde Wren. She's been staying at Ashworth Hall as my guest. Miss Wren. Lady Ashford's eyes swept over Isolde. I believe I've heard your name recently. Something about the Holt engagement? A misunderstanding, Isolde said smoothly. Lord Phineas and I discovered we were unsuited. Indeed. Lady Ashford glanced to where Phineas stood frozen, his mother gripping his arm. Though I must say, you seem to have landed rather well. The evening progressed with agonizing slowness. Isolde danced with Kaylin, then with a magistrate named Sir Hadrian Cole, who asked surprisingly pointed questions about shipping regulations. Phineas approached during a lull between dances. Miss Wren. His voice was tight, controlled, but she heard the fury beneath it. I'm surprised to see you here, after your unfortunate breakdown. What breakdown would that be, Lord Phineas? The one that caused you to flee our engagement and make wild accusations against my family. He stepped closer. I don't know what game you're playing with Ashworth, but it won't work. No one will believe anything you say. Won't they? Isolde met his gaze steadily. Because I've found that people believe all sorts of things when presented with evidence. Fear flickered in his eyes. Real fear. This isn't over, he hissed. No, Isolde agreed. It's just beginning. She walked away, her steps steady despite her pounding heart. Across the room, Kaylin caught her eye and nodded once. Phase 1 complete. The trouble began 2 hours later. Isolde had stepped onto the terrace for air. The night was cool, the gardens below illuminated by paper lanterns that swayed in the breeze. She heard footsteps behind her. Not Kaylin's measured stride. Something quicker, angrier. You think you're clever. Lady Giselle's voice was ice. Appearing here on his arm, pretending you've risen from the ashes. But you're nothing. A penniless girl playing dress-up in borrowed jewels. Isolde turned slowly. Lady Giselle, enjoying the party? What did you tell him? What lies have you fed Ashworth about my family? The truth isn't a lie, Lady Giselle, though I understand the confusion. Your family has dealt in lies for so long, you've forgotten the difference. The slap came fast. Isolde's cheek burned, but she didn't flinch. You stupid girl, the Ashworth fortune, the one Kaylin pretends to have lost? We know it exists. We know he's been hiding it. Then perhaps you shouldn't have murdered his family. Silence. Lady Giselle's face went gray. That's right, Isolde continued softly. I know about the fire. I know Evangeline was going to expose your trafficking operation, so you had her killed along with everyone who might have protected her. You can't prove any of that. Can't I? Footsteps on the terrace. Phineas emerged from the shadows, his expression desperate. Mother, we need to leave. Now. Cornelius Vance's daughter has been talking to investigators. She has documents. Letters her father left behind. Lady Giselle's calm shattered completely. That's impossible. We destroyed everything. Apparently not everything. Isolde felt cold satisfaction spreading through her chest. Kaylin had moved Vance's daughter to safety. He had also ensured that Vance's evidence survived. Here's what's going to happen, she said. Tomorrow, those documents will be delivered to Sir Hadrian Cole. Within a week, your accounts will be frozen. Within a month, you'll face charges that will end your family's reign permanently. Phineas grabbed her arm, his grip bruising. If you think we'll let you destroy us, remove your hand. Kaylin's voice cut through the darkness. He stepped onto the terrace, and even in the dim light, Isolde saw something dangerous in his expression. Now. Phineas released her, stepping back. This is between our families, Kaylin said quietly. You murdered my parents. You murdered my sister. You've spent 8 years believing you got away with it. He moved to stand beside Isolde, his hand finding hers. You were wrong. We'll destroy you both, Lady Giselle spat. We have connections you can't imagine. All of whom will distance themselves the moment they learn what you truly are. Kaelin's voice was ice. Trafficking in human beings isn't the kind of scandal that can be bought away. It's the kind that ends dynasties. Lady Giselle's face contorted with rage. Your family's death was quick. Yours won't be. Threatening a duke in front of witnesses? A new voice joined them. Sir Hadrian Cole stepped onto the terrace. That was unwise, Lady Giselle. Behind him stood Lady Ashford and 3 other guests who had followed the raised voices. How much did you hear? Kaelin asked. Enough. Sir Hadrian gestured to 2 footmen. Please escort Lord and Lady Holt to a private room. They'll be remaining here until morning. As the Holts were led away, Lady Giselle turned back one final time. This isn't over, she hissed at Isolde. I'll see you ruined, destroyed, dead. You already tried that, Isolde said quietly. It didn't work. The terrace fell silent. Isolde realized she was shaking, not from fear, but from the release of tension she had been holding for weeks. Kaelin pulled her into his arms. You were magnificent, he murmured against her hair. I was terrified. Those aren't mutually exclusive. He pulled back, his hands cupping her face. Are you hurt? It doesn't matter. It matters to me. His thumb brushed her reddened cheek. Everything about you matters to me. She looked up at him. This man who had spent years waiting for justice, who had found her at her lowest moment and seen something worth saving. Kaelin. Yes? She kissed him. Not a gentle kiss. Not a tentative exploration. A kiss that contained everything she had been holding back. Gratitude, admiration, and something deeper that she wasn't ready to name yet. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the paper lanterns swayed in a breeze that felt like blessing. That was unexpected, he said softly. Was it unwelcome? Never. He pulled her close again. Never. The next morning, Ashworth Hall was chaos. Messengers arrived hourly with updates. Sir Hadrian had begun formal proceedings. The Holt accounts had been frozen pending investigation. Phineas and his mother were under house arrest at Ashford House. But it wasn't over yet. Lord Holt himself is still free, Kaelin said grimly, studying a letter that had arrived at dawn. He was away on business when his wife and son were detained. He's returned to Thornhaven Manor and is gathering allies. What kind of allies? The kind that can be bought. Anyone who fears what a full investigation might reveal about their own involvement. He set the letter down. He's going to make a stand. Try to discredit everything before it goes any further. Isolde moved to stand beside him. How? There's a hearing scheduled for tomorrow evening. Lady Ashford offered her home as neutral ground. Lord Holt will present his defense, and witnesses will be called to testify. Kaelin met her eyes. You'll be one of them. I know. He'll try to destroy your credibility. Paint you as a scorned woman seeking revenge. Let him try. I know what I saw. I know what they've done. And I'm not afraid to say it under oath. Kaelin pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. When I found you in that ballroom, he said quietly, I thought I was acquiring a witness, a tool for my revenge. I didn't expect this. You, the way you've made me feel alive again after years of waiting to die alongside my family. Isolde pulled back to look at him. You never planned to survive this, did you? Something like that. And now? He touched her face. Now I want to survive. I want to watch you flourish in the world they tried to destroy you in. I want to wake up tomorrow, and the day after, and every day after that with you beside me. That sounds like more than partnership. It is. He swallowed hard. I love you, Isolde. I didn't plan to. I'm not even sure I remember how, but I do. She felt tears prick her eyes. Not sad tears. Something else entirely. I love you too, she whispered. And tomorrow we're going to finish this. Together. He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent. Together. Ashford House had been transformed into a courtroom. Rows of chairs faced a raised platform where Sir Hadrian Cole sat alongside 2 other magistrates. 40 of society's most influential members filled the seats. Lord Aldrich Holt stood at the front of the room, his bearing still proud. He was an older version of Phineas, the same cold eyes, the same calculated charm. Isolde sat in the front row beside Kaelin. Across the aisle, Lady Giselle and Phineas sat under guard, their faces tight with fury. We are gathered to hear evidence regarding allegations of financial fraud, human trafficking, and conspiracy to commit murder against the Holt family, Sir Hadrian announced. Lord Holt, you may speak first. Lord Holt rose, adjusting his coat with deliberate calm. Distinguished guests, honored magistrates, what you've heard are lies. Fabrications created by a disturbed young woman and weaponized by a man whose family's ruin drove him to madness. He gestured toward Isolde. Miss Wren was engaged to my son until she suffered a nervous collapse. Now she's reappeared with wild accusations, clearly coached by the Duke of Ashworth, who has nursed a vendetta against my family for years. The so-called evidence, forgeries, the witnesses, paid actors or coerced servants with grudges. Lord Holt's voice rang with conviction. I demand this farce be ended immediately. Sir Hadrian nodded slowly. Your Grace, do you wish to respond? Kaelin rose. I do. He walked to the front of the room. 8 years ago, my family died in a fire that was ruled an accident. I was 17. I lost my parents, my sister, everything I loved in a single night. His voice was controlled, but Isolde heard the steel beneath it. It was not an accident. It was murder, orchestrated by Lord Holt to eliminate my father, who had discovered the true nature of Holt shipping operations. Lies! Lord Holt shouted. Proof! Kaelin withdrew a thick folder from his coat. Correspondence between Lord Holt and the men who set the fire. Shipping manifests documenting the transport of human cargo. Bank records showing payments to foreign ports known for their trade in trafficked women. He handed the folder to Sir Hadrian. Every document has been authenticated by independent experts. Every transaction can be traced. The room exploded in whispers. Furthermore, Kaelin continued, I call Miss Isolde Wren to provide testimony regarding documents she personally observed in the Holt residence. Isolde rose, her legs steady despite her thundering pulse. She walked to the front of the room and faced the assembly. Several weeks ago, I was engaged to Lord Phineas Holt. During a visit to Thornhaven Manor, I discovered shipping records hidden in Lord Holt's private study. Those records listed young women as cargo, referred to as specialty goods, with prices attached to each name. She's lying! Phineas surged to his feet. She's been paid to— Sit down, Lord Phineas, Sir Hadrian commanded. Phineas was forced back into his seat. Isolde continued. When I confronted Lord Phineas about what I'd found, he offered me a choice. Marry him quietly and say nothing, or be destroyed. I chose to run. The Holts responded by fabricating debts, spreading rumors of my mental instability, and staging a public humiliation designed to ensure no one would ever believe anything I said. What they didn't anticipate, she met Lord Holt's eyes directly, was that someone would believe me anyway. This is circumstantial, Lord Holt said, his steadiness cracking. You have no proof of murder, no proof of trafficking. Then perhaps you'll accept testimony from someone inside your organization. Kaelin nodded toward the door. I call Miss Theodora Vance. The doors opened. A young woman entered, no older than 17, with her father's nervous eyes but a spine of steel. Miss Vance is the daughter of Cornelius Vance, who died last week in what was ruled an accidental carriage accident. Kaelin's voice hardened. Before his death, Mr. Vance provided his daughter with extensive documentation of his involvement in Holt operations. Theodora Vance approached the magistrates carrying a leather satchel. "My father kept everything," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Names of the women transported, ports of delivery, payments received. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should find someone brave enough to use it. She looked at Isolde. "I found her." She handed the satchel to Sir Hadrian. The room was utterly silent. Sir Hadrian reviewed several documents, then passed them to his fellow magistrates. Their expressions grew increasingly grim. "Lord Holt," Sir Hadrian said finally, "these documents corroborate every accusation made against your family. I have no choice but to order your immediate arrest, along with your wife and son, pending formal charges of fraud, trafficking in persons, and conspiracy to commit murder." "You can't do this!" Lord Holt lunged forward, but guards seized him immediately. "I am Lord Aldrich Holt. I have friends in Parliament." "Not anymore." Sir Hadrian's voice was ice. "Take them away." As the Holts were dragged from the room, Lady Giselle screaming threats, Phineas pale and silent, Lord Holt struggling against his captors, Isolde felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Kaelin's hand found hers. "It's over," he said quietly. "No." She squeezed his fingers. "It's just beginning." That night, Isolde stood on the balcony of Ashworth Hall, watching stars emerge from the darkness. The Holts were in custody. The investigation was proceeding. Already, names were surfacing. Other families involved in the trafficking network. Other victims who might finally be found. But tonight, there was stillness. Kaelin joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "You should be sleeping," he said, offering her a glass. "So should you." "I don't sleep much. Old habit." He stood beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "I keep expecting to wake up and discover this was all a dream. It's not. Thanks to you. Thanks to us." He turned to face her. "I spent nearly a decade planning their destruction, but none of it would have mattered without you." He set down his wineglass. "Isolde, I need to ask you something." "Yes?" "When this started, we agreed to an arrangement. You would testify. I would protect you. It was transactional." He took her hands in his, but somewhere between that first dance and tonight, everything changed. It changed for me, too. Then I need you to know that whatever comes next, the trials, the investigations, the rebuilding, I want you beside me. Not as a witness, not as a strategic asset. He paused, and she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "As my partner, my equal, my home, if you'll have me." Isolde felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Are you proposing?" "I'm asking if you could imagine a future where we face whatever comes together, where you're not just someone I saved, but someone who saved me in return." His voice cracked slightly. "I've been alone for so long. I don't want to be alone anymore." She released his hands and cupped his face instead, making him look at her. "Kaelin Ashworth," she said softly, "I didn't survive humiliation, betrayal, and watching the people who tried to destroy me get dragged away in chains just to walk away from the man who made all of it possible." She smiled through her tears. "Yes. To partnership, to equality, to home, to all of it." He kissed her then, under stars that seemed brighter than they had any right to be, in a world that finally felt like it might contain something other than darkness. When they pulled apart, breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he whispered. "I know." She laughed softly. "I love you too." 6 months later, Isolde stood in the grand hall of Ashworth Estate, watching morning light stream through windows that had once reflected only grief. The hall had been transformed. Where there had been silence, there was now laughter. Where there had been emptiness, there was now purpose. 12 young women sat at tables arranged throughout the space, learning skills that would give them independence, reading, writing, arithmetic, tradecrafts. Some had been rescued from the trafficking network the Holts had operated. Others had escaped similar situations. All of them had found sanctuary at Ashworth Hall, the Isolde Ashworth Foundation, Kaelin called it. Though she had protested the name. "You're the reason it exists," he had said. "Let it carry your name so others know survival is possible." Lady Giselle Holt had been sentenced to life imprisonment 3 months ago. Lord Holt had died in custody. His heart, the physician said. Phineas had been transported to a penal colony across the sea, his charm useless against iron bars and hard labor. The trafficking network was being dismantled piece by piece. 37 women had been recovered so far. More were being found every week. "You're thinking again." Kaelin appeared beside her, sliding his arm around her waist. "I can tell by the furrow between your eyebrows. I'm thinking about how different everything is." She leaned into him. "6 months ago, I was standing in a ballroom being publicly destroyed. Now you're standing in your own hall, running an organization that will save hundreds of lives, married to a man who adores you beyond reason." He kissed her temple. "Quite a reversal." "Married." She smiled at the word. The wedding had been small, just staff, a few trusted friends, and Sir Hadrian Cole, who had insisted on attending despite his busy schedule. "I'm still getting used to that." "Any regrets?" "Only that we didn't meet sooner. If we'd met sooner, neither of us would have been who we needed to be." Kaelin turned her to face him. "You had to become someone who wouldn't break under pressure. I had to become someone capable of more than just revenge. We found each other at exactly the right moment. When I was being forced to dance with the man everyone avoided. When you took my hand anyway." His eyes softened. "Do you know that's when I knew?" "Knew what?" "That you were different. Everyone else would have collapsed or wept or refused. You stood straight and placed your hand in mine like you were daring the world to do its worst." He smiled. "I fell in love with you in that moment, though I didn't recognize it for weeks. I thought you were a ruined outcast who had nothing to offer. I was, until you made me want to be something more." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mrs. Covenant entered, her expression warm in a way it never had been when Isolde first arrived. "Your Grace, there's a young woman at the gate. She says she escaped from a house in the eastern provinces and walked for 3 weeks to get here. She heard there was a place that helped people like her." Isolde exchanged a glance with Kaelin. "Send her in," she said. "Give her food, a bath, and a room. We'll speak with her when she's ready." Mrs. Covenant nodded and departed. "Another one," Kaelin said quietly. "Another one saved." Isolde squeezed his hand. "That's 13 this month. At this rate, we'll need to expand the West Wing." "Then we expand it." He laughed. A real laugh, the kind she had rarely heard from him before everything changed. "I've created a monster. You've created a partner." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "And I intend to be creating problems for injustice for a very long time." They stood there in the morning light, surrounded by the sounds of women learning to rebuild their lives, in a house that had once held only grief, but now held hope. Isolde had been forced to dance with the man everyone avoided. She had never stopped dancing since. Thank you for staying with us until the very end. If this story moved you, the courage to survive, the power of being believed, the strength it takes to turn humiliation into triumph, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment and where you're listening from. If you're ready for another story where love conquers the impossible, subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the next chapter. You're the reason these stories exist. Thank you for being here, for listening, for believing that even when the world tries to destroy you, the right hand reaching out can change everything.